Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours. $256. That is the number of promotional emails that I received over the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. And as we record this, we are fresh off the heels of Black Friday, Cyber Monday in 2024. And the dust is definitely still settling from one of the most chaotic retail weekends, or really weeks, of the year. So we are going to take a step back and look at what worked, what didn't, and what senders can learn from this year's madness. We're going to break everything down from inbox overload and spam filtering to Gmail's sneaky annotations and the so-called Black Friday extended sales.
Danielle, when I saw your 256 number, I went and checked my Gmail account and I must have broken it because it sort of gives you like of, sort of 50 of, and mine was just like of many. I think I broke my Gmail. Anyway,
It gave up.
Joining us today is Seth Charles, an established expert who has his finger firmly on the pulse of all things email and deliverability. With his 15 years of experience, nearly as many as me, Seth's got a clear perspective on how senders approach high volume periods like Black Friday and Cyber Monday. He's seen it all, from questionable email strategies to moments of brilliance, and he's here to help us unpack all the chaos and come away with actionable insights for the future. Welcome to the show, Seth. It's so cool to have you here today with myself and Danielle.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. It's always great to hang out and catch up with old friends.
Nice.
And let's kick off with an icebreaker, as we usually do. And we're going to do, I guess, the most deliverability related icebreaker question that we've had, at least recently. So, Seth, if your inbox were a party, which I'm sure it is right now, what is the one type of email you absolutely don't want to show up uninvited?
Oh, it's a great question. It is a party. It's a crowded party. It's the kind of party where I'm trying to find a window to like slip out the back door without anyone noticing. Yeah. That's a funny question. Yeah. I think the uninvited guest is the friend of the guest that I actually did invite. So they show up because they're friends with someone that I actually invited. So it's just, they're like, oh, well, you didn't invite me, but we have a mutual friend. That's the one that I would not like to my party. And then they keep showing up after the party's over.
And they stay too late.
Yeah,
Sure.
Exactly.
So, Black Friday, Cyber Monday 2024, it's just wrapped up. It felt huge. We're actually pulling the data for this month's State of Email webinar, and I don't want to give away all the secret sauce, but it does feel like it was bigger than last year. That's how it felt. So, Seth, what were your initial observations? Is it just me, or did it feel like, once again, we were just drowning in emails this year, perhaps even more so than usual?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we observed too, and just personally in my own inbox. I think that brands in general are still looking for that sweet spot. They haven't really found it yet, where it's just like, at what point does it become too many? It's just like every year kind of builds on itself. So at what point, if at all, does that bubble pop? I think that the volume was certainly more than last year. I expect the same for next. But yeah, I think that it was just a sort of Three Stooges effect where all of the emails were trying to like jam their way through the doorway at the same time. Except they weren't friends. So it was, they were all uninvited guests to my party. They were all trying to jam their way through the doorway. So yeah, the volume piece, strangely enough, more so than any kind of creative copy or promotions necessarily, the volume actually stuck out to me more than anything else.
And even if Guy and I, and yourself too, if we didn't have the data to prove it, didn't have the data to show that it was just so overwhelmingly huge, the volume spike, we would know it, right? We all have our own mailboxes. And inevitably, I had to ask myself, and now I'll ask you, do you think this surge in volume was strategic, or are brands just trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks? What do you think about that?
God, I think that's a great question. And I think it kind of depends on the brand. In just as work in e-commerce before and digital marketing, I've found myself like beating off the wolves relative to like the leadership consistently saying, hey, let's send more. Well, we sent 5 last time. Let's send 6 this time. Let's send 7 next time. So I think that depending on the type of user relationship that an end user has with a brand, I can't think of necessarily an example of where like 6 emails in 2 days would make sense. But in the chance that it would, then fine. But hopefully that's data backed. But yeah, I mean, I think brands are so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they never stop to think if they should. Just like
Great
Dr.
point.
Ian Malcolm said.
At what point do you think that acceleration in email frequency actually starts to backfire? Do you think there must be like too much of a good thing when it comes to hitting inboxes with multiple emails a day? Or do you just think the senders think the risk is worth the reward?
Man. Yeah. I mean, they have to, right? They're doing it. So they must think that the reward is worth it. Something that I think that it must be some sort of calculated risk. You hope that it is, because recipient and sender email fatigue is a real thing. So think in a vacuum, right? Would this particular end user want to hear from me 9 times this weekend? Even if it was just some random weekend, probably not. And it's like, okay, what if this recipient was hearing from you 9 times and everyone else 9 times? You hope, right? And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about data and intelligence that senders can get, but you have to hope that they're using some sort of like data or some sort of insight that they're using to gauge that with. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the case a lot of the time.
Well, and I think in our initial discussion too, this came up, which is like, it seems almost like sending 4, 5, 6 emails in a weekend, Black Friday, Cyber Monday or not, is like a crude version of a way that marketers can do send time optimization. Where they're just like, let's see which one of these is our best time to deploy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we could try to like pick the lock to the door, or we could just send a wrecking ball through it. So it's like, yeah, either work, but one's a little more subtle.
So a real point of interest, I think, for the three of us and a lot of our industry peers was that this year was the first time that Black Friday and Cyber Monday were having to deal with the newish Gmail and Yahoo bulk sender requirements since they've been rolled out. And do you think we're starting to see real consequences from those new rules in the way that email's being handled, or is it still too early to tell?
No, I think that even in a realm of developing policy, it does make sense that there's a lot of trailing indicators that we probably haven't run into yet. I think that while maybe not overt, so there's maybe not just kind of like being smacked right in the face with some sort of damage done because a sender isn't following those new regulations, I think that it's very likely that in retrospect in the coming months, relative to this Black Friday compared to last, for example, I think that there will be some metrics that can be compared that would show some sort of degradation of performance based on whether or not a sender is following the regulations and policies that they rolled out. And then that's not even counting, right? Like the potential collateral effect of senders trying to monkey around in their DNS without really knowing how or why what they're doing. So, but that's the science side.
I completely agree with you. I think the ramifications are actually going to be more clear after all the big volume goes out, because one of those requirements, as everybody who's listened to this podcast probably knows by now, because Guy and I won't shut up about it, is that 0.3 maximum spam complaint rate. And when your volume goes away, those spam complaints are going to continue to come. So I wonder what rejected rates are going to look like over the next little bit. It's a gamble.
And it doesn't mean that 0.29 is okay.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah. Another point that I feel like we've just completely exhausted you with.
Once that denominator shrinks, you really start to get a strong understanding of exactly how wanted your mail is.
Totally. And I mean, really, there was some additional drama going on in November too, outside of just like basically the Super Bowl of email marketing peak season. That is the US presidential election. I had many customers ask me specifically whether they should send on or around the actual election date. And I was surprised just how many customers are coming to me with that concern and with that question. So do you think the election cycle had any impact on the way that brands approached their campaigns in November more broadly? And then I guess, did we see any delays or slowdowns in campaigns because were people distracted by politics maybe?
Oh gosh, yeah, the short answer is I sure hope it went into consideration. The answer is it absolutely should play into consideration. I think that it was a crazy time. I think inboxes are going to be a little shell shocked going into 2025 because of all the volume that they saw from all these different kind of like huge events relative to digital marketing. But yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to the overall strategy, right, of how the political season kind of drew right into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which this year was notably later, right? And then we're going to be digging right and diving right into Christmas stuff, right? And there was not any kind of break at all. So when it comes to the political traffic and how it kind of corresponds with holiday traffic in general, I think centers should consider if whether or not they have something to gain by sending during this time, as opposed to considering whether or not they have something to lose by it. And that's kind of a paradox shift that I think some centers should have is, well, we don't want to miss out. We don't want to miss out. And let's try to figure out something to do because we have to do something because it's the season. But again, do you have something to lose by trying to do this? And I think the answer is yes, because you're in that much bigger of an ocean of content.
Yeah, I feel like any sender who maybe delayed campaigns a little early in November, then had to push a whole bunch of stuff and like cram it out into like a couple of weeks. So it may have just like made the volumes look even more elevated. But one of the other things that we were kind of throwing around was just what can sometimes feel like a false sense of urgency with all of these campaigns that we're receiving. Where it's like today only, tonight only, tomorrow only, like this week only. And so I wonder if the combination of like political uncertainty and then the clear economic drive that a whole bunch of these brands had to just send and send. Do you think consumers were actually holding back from committing to deals because they know maybe better stuff is coming?
Well, yeah, because they've been trained that way, right? Like consumers we're all domesticated pets at this point. I think if somebody's like, hey, if somebody sends me an email saying 25% off, it's Black Friday, 25% off, you better do it because it ends today. Part of me is like, okay, fine, I won't do it because I'm jaded and vindictive at this point when it comes to email. But also it's like, I know you're sending me an email tomorrow saying 25% off. I know you're going to send me an email that's saying, hey, we've extended Black Friday, Cyber Monday, extended, or Cyber Week, or all those other sorts of things. So I think that the sense of urgency is not going away, but I think that it rings empty to try and force someone down the plank within hours.
You talking about domesticated pets, I feel like I've just had the most brilliant idea because in the old days, long before we had email, this stuff used to literally come through your letterbox. And if you were lucky, you had a dog which would chew it all up and rip it to shreds. And I feel, how about this for an email plugin? We'll have like a little cartoon dog. And every time like you click, this is spam, the dog comes rushing in and sort of grabs that spam email and tears it to shreds and kicks it into the spam folder for you.
A personification of a spam filter.
It's the Fido. It's the Fido spam filter.
That's right. Yeah.
Fido.
Yes.
Trademark. Witness.
Okay, you heard it here first.
Let's go.
Back to the serious conversation. I think everything we've been talking about so far, I think all these talking points have absolutely reshaped the deliverability challenge. And I think, Danielle, you and I were looking at sort of old graphs from our return path days, and you used to plot Black Friday deliverability, and it was almost like this sort of V-shaped curve, and then it bounced back. But now it feels that deliverability hangover lasts well into the new year. And Seth, do you think that brands pay the price for rushing things during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and that price is one that takes a while to pay back?
There's no question. There isn't any question, right? Because I think that on one hand, it would make sense to me that these mailbox receivers are saying, hey, with all of these tools and all of these resources to have insights into things like reputation and how what you're doing is impacting what your deliverability and what your reputation overall might be, is they're getting more sophisticated in how they're modeling that more in perpetuity than maybe things used to be. Back when I started, certainly early in likely both of your careers, it was I'm on a block list. And as soon as you remedy that block list, it's very binary and you're either blocked or you're not. And now it's like,
The good old
they're
days.
right. Exactly. It's like query it and, throw the IP in there. No, I'm good. So, but now, yeah, I think people could, in some senders, maybe cutting off their nose to spite their face a little bit and putting all of their chips in the middle of the table for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, not realizing that through the winter, through the spring, before they know it, they're going to be trying to push summer promotions, and stuff that they do now can very well impact how leading up to that time might be, simply from the transmission perspective of trying to deliver the mail. And that's not even considering the long-term effect of how that could impact your user data. It's like you may be sacrificing future customer data for the year's promotions if you just try to blow everything out of the water during the promotion season.
100%.
I think that's such a good point. And I'm thinking too, just about, we're not done. Like, it's not Boxing Day anymore. It's Boxing Week. There's the 12 days of Christmas. Like, I wonder if the ramifications really do last longer if the peak season lasts longer. That's really interesting. And I understand completely that all brands need to stay competitive. And we have talked about just the length of the promotional period, right? It started weeks before. And one of the things that we noticed, something that really caught our attention, was that a lot of the emails that ended up in spam or junk folders were sent a full week. It was like, prepare yourself, early pre-Black Friday week deals. And I wonder, when a marketer is trying to balance staying competitive with not bombarding their audience, is there a hidden risk in jumping the gun? Or do you think there's like a sweet spot in terms of timing?
I certainly think that there's the sweet spot, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's X amount of days prior to Black Friday. I think that the sweet spot, and again, I feel like there is one, I feel like the sweet spot is unique to the relationship between the recipient and the sender. So it's a function of what kind of consumer relationship the recipient of that email has with that brand. So if this particular consumer has demonstrated that they are a super user, they're jumping on every message you happen to send, and you have this long historical backlog of strong endorsement, sure, there's nothing wrong with trying to tether that out a little bit. But I think that, saying, hey, we're going to blast to our full Cyber Monday list a week before, hoping that it's going to have the kind of specific recipient engagement that this super user population might give you, would be misguided.
Back to trends we saw this year. I think another one, not for the first time, I couldn't help feeling that I was looking at some brands this year that just really shouldn't have even tried to get in on the Black Friday frenzy. I saw a Black Friday email from a procurement company, for Pete's sake, doing Black Friday offers. And you're just thinking, how can brands figure out if Black Friday really is the right fit for them? And Seth, do you think there's actually certain companies that are better off skipping the Black Friday madness altogether?
No, well, for sure, right? And we've talked a little bit about that, right? If there's something to lose versus something to gain. And yeah, there's always an excuse. If you dig hard enough, you could always find an excuse to send something over that time and try to shove yourself through that doorway. But yeah, I think that unless you're some sort of like e-commerce revenue conversion driven business, there is sometimes you can make the best impact on what you're trying to accomplish by just sitting it out and letting the dust settle, and then kind of stepping in and having a little bit more of a quieter canvas to work with.
And I wonder, like, there is something to being creative, right? In standing out, both at like either the subject line or the email content, to make sure that you can distinguish yourself from all the other 255 emails that are landing in a mailbox. And I wondered, like, do you think brands should aim for more creativity during Black Friday or other peak times? Or is a simple, clear value proposition the way to go? Like, I wonder if creativity can actually hurt performance, if it's too maybe out there or outside of the brand voice, I guess.
That's a fine line for sure when it comes to trying to step a little too far outside or be a little too creative. That's one of the great things about deliverability, right? It's why so many of us have made a career out of it, but the goal line's always moving. So there are periods where There's a lot of things on the science side, the infrastructure, DNS, very well documented, very clear. And then there's some years, and I think that this is a good example of that, where there's a huge emphasis on the art side of that too. So it's cliche and bears repeating for sure, but you have to test and you have to understand. If you want to make a subject line of all emojis and think that's going to resonate with your customers, then hopefully it's a calculated risk.
Yeah, especially when your smart speaker's reading it out to you.
Oh, I love when that happens too.
Right. I was thinking with this question specifically about, are you guys familiar with the brand Calm? They have like a meditation app.
Very
Yes.
familiar. You know?
Which I love. I think it's great. I think they have a lot of really helpful information. They have like a clear, very defined value. And I couldn't help thinking, I was getting emails from them over the course. They were in there, they were in the mix. And I couldn't help feeling like there was such a missed opportunity for them to just be like, the subject line, breathe, meditate. It's almost the end of
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
I don't know. I just feel like it's
You're doing
appropriate.
great.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the idea of you have to be creative, but yeah, totally. Calculated risk is what we're going for with these peak times.
For me, another fascinating trend, I think we've seen more this year of Gmail automatically applying annotations to emails to sort of display those sort of code snippets or the image, whether the senders put the annotations code in their email or not. And it had some real unintended consequences for Black Friday senders. I saw at least one example where, Gmail had highlighted a time-sensitive offer and it had already expired by the time I saw it, which isn't really helpful. What's your take on this? Do you think this is helping the user experience or is it just adding to the chaos?
Yes. I think that it's like really anything else. It's like in a garage full of gear and tools. This is yet another suite of tools that are being added to that. And sometimes senders are going to know how to use them well, and sometimes they're not. So I think that regardless, customers need to be, or I should say senders need to be prepared to understand what its impact might be. Whether it's, if you want to be deliberate about it, which in the world of deliverability, in the world of email marketing and marketing in general, in the digital space, everything should be deliberate. So if you don't use annotations, you should be deliberately not using that, and therefore be prepared for what kind of actions you need to take in the event that it's applied. And if you are, be deliberate about, okay, if this happens and it's past this time, what then? Does it have a fallback? Once this changes, it dynamically updates into whatever is a home template or something like that. So I think it can help, but I also think that it's going to lead to some pretty good conversation fodder for people like us in the meantime.
Guy, can you remind me if I've told my annotations horror story from a client?
Oh, I don't feel like we've heard this one yet. This is going to be like an email after hours sort of sneak peek. Go on.
Or like an after hours nightmare for sure. So this client noticed after logging into their own like Gmail account, they hadn't logged in a little while, that all of their emails were coming through with an annotation that said expired. Every single one. Expired.
Oh, no.
They couldn't find anything in the body, like of the HTML. They couldn't understand what was happening. Finally, they found that in the master template that all of the other pieces of content get inserted into, in the footer in the code was an annotation with an old date in it from like 2 years ago.
Oh, you got.
Every email, every single promotion looked like it. And it was so clear. It's right after the friendly from expired.
Oh, no.
Expired.
Woo.
And they found it had been going on for a couple of months. And my heart was beating so hard for them.
Yeah,
I was just like, oh my, like guys. So
all the people like frantically logging into their messaging platform to review every date code that they have.
Yeah, let's compare how we did last year at this time to this year at this time. So you have to, if you're going to be intentional about something like annotations, which I agree you should, be very careful about it. Test it first, please, everybody.
Cautionary tale for sure. Let's lighten it up a bit. I think we spent quite a lot of time talking about things from Black Friday, Cyber Monday that maybe we didn't like all that much. But Seth, what was the best Black Friday email you saw this year? What was the one that had you thinking, yes, this is a winner?
It's hard to choose, both because there was a billion of them and because there were some, like you were saying, Danielle, there were some that were kind of stepping outside their normal tone, I'd say, or voice, so to speak. But yeah, this one was actually making waves a little bit on LinkedIn and whatnot. But actually, Liquid Death had a cart abandon campaign go out that broke the fourth wall. And in the world of Deadpool and Wolverine, it broke the fourth wall. It was because the copy was basically like, hey, it's me, the person that writes these. I don't like to do this, but I'm actually kind of worried about you. So if you're there, blink twice or something. And it was basically trying to like get them to go in and do this action just to confirm that they were okay. So I thought that was just like a clever use of kind of breaking tone in a way that kind of grabs attention in a fun way, for sure.
That's very good.
What about you, Guy? Did you have a favorite?
I've probably got two, actually. I think the serious answer to the question, there was a great email from Estee Lauder here in the UK, and it actually went out in late September, but it was a feedback email from their customers. And it was basically, have you started your festive shopping? Tell us how you'd like to shop so that we can improve the offers and rewards we send you. And the options were, yep, I love to get ahead, or I shop whenever I see a great offer. No, I'm waiting for Black Friday. No, I do it all in December. And I thought that was really clever, you know,
So
tell us
good.
when you
Who
want to
was that
start
guy?
receiving. I love that. Kudos to you guys at Estee Lauder. That was very
Estee
clever.
Lauder. That's amazing.
I think the slightly more tongue-in-cheek way, you know how like a lot of brands will sort of tweak the wording to play to their branding. So if like your main color's blue, it's like Blue Friday or Pink Friday. Well, for reasons that I'm not even going to explain, I'm signed up to receive Durex's emails, and they did rebrand it as Cyber Monday, which I thought was pretty clever.
Love it. Love it.
That's
I love
right.
it. I think that's a classic and weirdly appropriate way to stand out.
Stand out, yes.
But let's flip it, because
Hang on. You need to answer the question too, Danielle.
Oh, I do. I do have one. It's a little bit like yours, Guy. Well, not quite like your example, but it was my favorite. And I wonder if this is like the email consultant's email where you see it and you're just like, ooh, good, like sniggering a little bit. But it's from a brand called The Ordinary, which is a skincare brand. I buy their stuff. I love it. And the subject line was, we're closing up today, brackets, November 29th. And basically the point of the email was take Black Friday off. And I think that the brief text that they had in there was about advocating for a more considered approach to promotions instead of just going on a frenzy and saying, we'll be back open tomorrow, and here's a deal that runs into December. Now, the irony of this is, of course, they did send an email to tell me
Right.
that they were not going to be promoting to me on Black Friday, but I loved it. I thought it was unique, right? Compared to all of the other dollar off, percent off. It's like we're closing shop. I thought it was
That's
cool.
very good.
Yeah. Okay, now, can I flip it, Guy? Can I talk about the dark side of what drove us crazy?
Side. Yes.
Yeah. So the flip of this question for you, Seth, did you see any email, or I'm sure you saw many emails that had you just go, no, or gave you the cringe?
Absolutely. And it hit me on both of like the deliverability side of my brain and the email marketer side of my brain, because there were several brands that not only did they hammer, like what we've said, was 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, where they're like, that's my optimization. We know he's in there. He's got to check sometime. But it was also a no change whatsoever in the promotion and very subtle, if any, changes to the copy itself. So it was like almost, hey, 25% off, get your 25% off. And then that later, hey, we told you it's 25% off. You better get your 25. And it was, hey, 25% still. And I was like, these people are just like flooding. And honestly, when I give a brand the more overt feedback of unsubscribing, that's one thing. But also there's subtle feedback that recipients give too, where it's like, it's not hitting with this person. And I went from just going clearing and deleting, deleting without reading and all those things, to I finally started to complain about it because I was
Me
like, they're not,
too, Seth.
that's it. They're not getting the subtle feedback. They're not getting the nudges. So I'm going to start using something a little more blunt, object-y.
Guy.
I'm not going to sort of name and shame specifically, but I think we touched on this already. I think how soon is too soon. And there was more than a handful of senders who are hitting my inbox in sort of, last week of October. And it's like, hey, Black Friday's nearly here. And it's like, guys, let's get through Halloween first. And so I'll put them in one bucket. But certainly for me, and I think probably quite a few consumers, that's just way too soon. I am so not ready to get my brain into Black Friday gear that early.
No, it's like when you go into a store and you see it's not yet Halloween and you go into a store and you see the big Christmas decorations display. And you're like, oh, can I get through one thing, please?
Yeah, when the aisle is like halfway done, you can see.
Yeah. Have Christmas, have Valentine's Day.
I'm with you though, Seth. Like I expected, of course, so many emails, but there were some brands where truly I was getting 6 emails a day. And I felt like it almost became a little bit of a challenge. Like, yeah, send me another one. Send me another one. You'll see what happens. And it takes, as a deliverability consultant, I have to be really annoyed to mark a message as spam because
That's right.
know what that can do.
So Danielle, referencing back to previous email after hours episodes, how many toilet seats did you buy?
That's right.
I got a lot of toilet seat spam. Yeah, it was just for me. Even if I had wanted to buy something, I was so overwhelmed by the amount of offers that were in there. I started, instead of looking at the offers, just looking for brands I trusted. So it was less about even the offer and more about that recognition and like the relationship that's built over the course of the year. I'm willing to tolerate a little bit of batch and blast from a brand that I love.
That's right. This has been such a cool conversation. I'd love to keep it going for another half an hour, but we need to start wrapping things up. And Seth, like a closing question for you. And it's funny because you actually just touched on Valentine's Day. And I think in my mind, successful email marketing is like a successful personal relationship. And actually, every day should be Valentine's Day. Every day you should be putting in the hard yards and putting in the effort. So if we have to sum up the conversation we've had today, what do you think are some of the best practices that Friday and Cyber Monday marketers can actually carry over and apply throughout the year? You think, is there anything we can take from these crazy retail events and make it work in day-to-day email marketing?
For sure. There's a lot. And when it comes to, and this applies to the relationship metaphor, this applies to the party metaphor that we even started with. When it comes to the email or digital marketers and a consumer's relationship, it is a relationship. It's a conversation. And I think that the best thing that a sender can do is understand all the explicit and implicit signals that a sender or a recipient can send. And those signals are they've stopped engaging with email, or they engage with a certain type of promotion, or all these sort of data points that float out there. And I think that when it comes to the party analogy, they, in theory, have signed up to receive your mail, and you have to make them appreciate that. You have to keep yourself invited. You can't annoy them into asking you to leave. And I think that of all the implicit data points out there, the explicit ones are important too. And Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and just throughout the year, it is the consistent execution of the data points that you're afforded. And I think that the misuse or ignoring those data points is a huge mistake by senders these days.
I love that. Thank you, Seth, so much for sharing your valuable insights and your expertise with us today. And for listeners that are interested in connecting with you or learning more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I publish blogs occasionally on Iterable's blog site, as does the deliverability team at large. And also my LinkedIn profile is the best way to get a hold of me individually.
And just to finish up, Danielle and I, we're just super proud of all the great guests who join us on Email After Hours. And of course, we're always looking out for new guests to join us on future episodes. So if you'd like to join us for an upcoming recording, drop us a comment, ping us on LinkedIn. or you can even fill out the guest form that's linked to the show notes. And we'd love to have that chat and put you into the hot seat sometime soon. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys again. Bye for now. Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.